All right, then I will call this meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee to order. It looks like we will be starting in a subcommittee of the Judiciary. If the esteemed secretary would please take the roll.
Vice Chair Cannizzaro.
I know that she will be here. If you'd mark her present when she arrives, please.
Senator Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Harris.
Senator Harris will also be joining us shortly. If you would mark her present when she arrives.
Senator Settlemyre.
I assume he will be joining us shortly. If you'd mark him present when he arrives.
Senator Hansen. Senator Pickard.
Again, I assume he will be joining us and ask that you mark him present when he arrives.
Chair Scheibel.
Oh, and I am here. And so is Senator Pickard. You can mark him present now. And with 4 of us, that does create a quorum, so we will go directly into a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have 2 bills to hear today from our wonderful colleagues over on the Assembly side. Do you have a preference for order? Okay. Let's go ahead and take AB 113 first then. And I will now open the hearing on AB 113.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. For the record, I am Melissa Hardy and I represent Assembly District 22 in Clark County. And I want to thank you for considering Assembly Bill 113, which extends the statute of limitations for prosecution of sex trafficking. So in the interest of time, I want to be brief so we can focus on the merits of the bill and hear the story of the young woman that brought this issue to my attention during the interim. So I have on the Zoom Ms. Gabrielle Bolio and Mr. Brian Schwartz from the DA's office. And just a little background on this bill. I had the privilege over the interim of working with a group of UNLV Boyd Law School students with an organization called Policy and Legislation Society, of which my daughter served as president this past year. And they started a competition called Making the Law Competition. And during the inaugural competition, Ms. Bolio presented a bill in the semifinals. And some of us in this room were judges for that competition. And this was one of the bills that was presented. And when I heard this bill, in preparing to come to session, I talked with Ms. Bolio and asked if she would be amenable to me carrying this bill during the session. And she graciously said yes, and so I want to thank her for all of her work and research on this subject and in preparing for this hearing and for the hearing in the Assembly. So I would like to turn it over first to Ms. Bolio, and she's a senior staffer at Nevada Law Journal and a Juris Doctorate candidate at UNLV Boyd School of Law, and will soon be graduating in a couple of weeks. And following her presentation, and I would like Mr. Brian Schwartz from the DA's office to go through the bill and discuss the bill. And hopefully you do have the first reprint as it was amended over on the Assembly side. So if that's okay, I'd ask Ms. Bolio to give her remarks.
Yes, we are looking at the first reprint. Ms. Bolio, it is nice to see you again, and please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hello, my name is Gabrielle Bolio, for the record. I am a third-year law student at the William S. Boyd School of Law, and I have my master's in political science. I wrote my thesis on international human trafficking, and then I chose to attend law school here in Las Vegas for the purpose of partnering with local organizations to fight sex trafficking. I have walked Tropicana and Flamingo and seen traffickers patrol while I hand out water bottles to the victim survivors who are still under their control. I've responded to calls from victim survivors who are desperate to get out of an abusive relationship. I've watched victim survivors refuse services because they genuinely do not believe that they are victims of sex trafficking. And I've watched children show up in court again and again, but nothing keeps them from running back to their traffickers at the first opportunity. I've also, for the last year, mentored young girls who have been through more horrors in their short lives than I can wrap my head around. Both my research and my personal experiences have taught me that sex trafficking causes layers and layers of trauma, making it all but impossible for a victim survivor to be able to come forward to law enforcement, at least not until after years of healing. And I wrote this bill, the original draft of this bill, in acknowledgement of that fact, and I presented it at the law school's Making the Law competition, where the bill was graciously sponsored by Assemblywoman Hardy. And so I just want to talk briefly about why it's necessary that we give victim survivors more time to heal before letting this clock run out. A common misconception of sex trafficking is that it's perpetuated by a stranger in a van. And this is not only untrue, generally speaking, but it's a very harmful and dangerous misconception, because the truth is that traffickers do not maintain control of their victims primarily through violence or threats of violence. Rather, it's through intense and intentional psychological abuse and manipulation that takes years to undo. To start, traffickers target the most vulnerable individuals, generally people who lack a broader support system, and also usually people who already have a history of other types of complex trauma and abuse. Traffickers will then build a relationship with this individual, manipulating Maslow's hierarchy of needs to make the victim dependent on the trafficker. And then traffickers will begin alternating between emotional and physical abuse and rewards. And all this confusion creates what's known as a trauma bond between the victim and the trafficker. And these trauma bonds essentially make the trafficker indispensable in the victim's life from the victim's own perspective. Traffickers will also blame victims, destroying their sense of self and self-worth. They may threaten the victim's friends and family if they were to ever dare come forward about what they've experienced. And then we also have to remember that sometimes sex trafficking is a family enterprise, which means that we are asking someone to come forward and report their own family members. And so, as if all this weren't enough to show why we need to give these individuals more time, studies have also shown that victim survivors of sex trafficking experience PTSD at levels comparable with war veterans. And these symptoms do not necessarily decrease over time, which is particularly problematic because one common symptom of PTSD is avoidant coping mechanisms, which is where someone copes with their trauma by avoiding it. It's also been defined as cognitive and emotional orientation away from the threat or the memory of the threat. And so studies have shown that people with avoidant coping mechanisms find it almost impossible to talk about their trauma in a timely manner. And these avoidant coping mechanisms are both more likely to occur and are heightened by factors that are endemic to sex trafficking. Since with sex trafficking, we're talking about repeated high-intensity physical trauma over an extended period of time, coupled with severe psychological manipulation. And on top of all of that, we also have to consider some unique factors that make it difficult for survivors of sex trafficking specifically to talk to police. We have to remember that police and law enforcement is still a male-dominated field, and that these individuals have been abused primarily by men. Most of these survivors also have had a history of bad experiences with police, both as children and as adults. And then finally, we have to remember the lies and manipulations of the traffickers, because the last thing the traffickers want is for their victims to trust law enforcement or anyone else trying to help them. Traffickers do everything they can to make sure that their victim survivors feel alone in the world, except for their traffickers. For these reasons, we as Nevadans must recognize the needs of victim survivors of sex trafficking. For their sake, and for the sake of a more just society, we must extend the statute of limitations for sex trafficking offenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolio, for sharing that information. And now if I could have Mr. Schwartz from the DA go through the bill, and then we can take any questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brian Schwartz from the District Attorney's Office. I work in the Special Victims Unit here, and one of two deputies that are handling the sex trafficking cases right now. And I echo everything Ms. Bolio said about the reasons why this would be important. We see a lot of cases where it does take a lot more time for victims to feel comfortable and get to a place where they are ready to talk about it and be involved in the prosecution. So we definitely see the fear, the manipulation, the control, and all those different factors that she addressed very, very frequently with the victims that we interact with and try to prosecute on behalf of. So, and I apologize if I do it wrong when I'm reading through it, but I know that we had amended to remove sections 1, 2, and 3 of the bill, and section 3 would be amended to be a 6-year statute of limitations for sex trafficking. Sex trafficking must be found or an information or complaint filed within 6 years after the commission of the offense, so it would be extended from 4 years to 6 years. And if there's any additional questions or thoughts that I could be of use to answer, I'd be happy to.
All right, thank you so much. Are there questions from members of the committee? Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, my question's for the DA. Out of curiosity, how many cases do you guys typically handle in a year in Clark County?
That's a great question. I wish I had the statistics for you on that. I would say as far as sex trafficking cases, we're receiving, I wouldn't know the year, but we're getting new ones, I'd say, on a weekly basis. And me and Pete Tennell's another individual who's handling them. And I'd say we are at least getting, let's see, 2 a week. I'd say about 10 a month at the least. But I could definitely provide some more concrete statistics for the committee.
So you just said 10 a month or 10 a week?
I would say at least 10 a month.
Oh, so about 120 cases a year then, roughly. Okay, and how many have you had that where you could have possibly prosecuted them except for the statute of limitations?
I'd say it's hard to say that because we don't typically get cases that the statute of limitation has already run. It doesn't get to us at that point. So I wouldn't be able to give you an answer on that one, unfortunately.
Okay. No, I'm supportive of the bill. I'm just more curious about some of the statistics on some of this stuff. We had a bill where we're going to now allow civil prosecutions for businesses that have allowed things like this to go on, and it's almost, I forget what the limitation is, but it's pretty extensive. The 6 years, was that done after, I'm kind of curious as to why you only added 2 years instead of the 4 that you had in statute. I was involved with the Bill Cosby hearing way back when, and they were trying to get 20 years, and so I'm just kind of curious why we ended up at 6.
Yeah, I think that was a concern at the last hearing that we were at as well, why we didn't have a longer one. I know that all of us in support of the bill had hoped for maybe a little bit more time, but it sounded like we landed on the extra 2 years just to, based on some pushback from having too long of a statute of limitations, but perhaps maybe someone else will be able to address the specifics. But that was my understanding of why we kind of had to figure out where the middle ground would be, and I think 6 was the best we thought we could do at this point.
And if I could address that, Melissa Hardy for the record. Originally, the bill was to just remove the statute of limitations entirely. And as Mr. Schwartz said, this was kind of where we landed. Obviously, I would like it to be longer. But, you know, this is, like he said, from pushback and some negotiation and stuff on the other side, this is where we landed at 6 years. You know, hopefully maybe in time it could be extended. And Ms. Bolio, you know, she agreed when I originally talked to her about this. You know, we wanted it just to not have it at all. But we felt that this was at least a step forward, a step in the right direction to help these victims. And maybe at some point it could be increased. So that's how we ended up.
I got it. It's a reasonable compromise this way. I mean, honestly, you know, you're supposed to have a reasonably speedy trial, innocent till proven guilty, and that sort of stuff in criminal law. So it's a little touchy on how far you can extend out these types of prosecutions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And any other questions? I also wanted just a little bit more clarity, not on the 6 years, but on how we came to 6 years. And it occurs to me in reading this section of the law, obviously Section 3, subsection 1 applies to a whole host of different felonies, but sex trafficking, I think, is the only one listed here that would be considered an ongoing offense. And so I was wondering if you could speak to how that changes the calculus when you are counting back to the statute of limitations, and whether that makes the 6 years more or less significant for a sex trafficking prosecution.
I'll go ahead and let Mr. Schwartz answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I
And if you could-
believe that the statute,
Give us your name for the record. You need to put your name on the record every time you speak.
sorry, I'm so bad at that, Brian Schwartz. And as far as when it would start, the statute of limitations typically, my understanding for sex trafficking, you'd be correct, it would be an ongoing. So at the conclusion of the sex trafficking offense, I suppose that would be when the statute of limitations would begin. And so the additional 6 years would be important from that point, because even though the victims, survivors, typically when they would get away from the situation, we would hope that they would be ready to speak about it. Oftentimes, and as Ms. Bolio mentioned, it's just not going to happen right away. They need to get away from the situation, get their affairs and life in order, maybe even get to a place where they can really comprehend that they were the victims. A lot of times, even though they'll get out of the situation, they don't fully understand how bad that situation was and how much of a victim they were. And so that would be at least the importance, from my perspective, and the benefit to having more time to prosecute once the statute of limitations begins and the offense has ended.
So to clarify, if, for example, a survivor had been trafficked from the time they were 10 to 15 years old, that means that when he or she is 21, if they disclose at that point in time, the prosecuting agency would be able to prosecute the trafficker for that full 5-year period, assuming that the offense was ongoing throughout that whole period of time.
That's correct. It would be a little bit different, though, in the example that you provided, because there's a different statute of limitations that applies to minors. So if you're sex trafficked while you're under the age of 18, there's a completely different statute with, there's actually 2 different types of statute of limitations that would apply in that scenario. And I believe, for example, if in the scenario you mentioned, there would be like 36-year statute of limitations because they were sex trafficked while they were under the age of 18. So this amendment really focuses on a victim who is sex trafficked when they're not a minor, when they're 18 and older, because there's a different statute that's going to apply for the under 18.
I think that is an excellent
I wish
point.
I had that one in front of me, but
No,
I'm sorry I don't.
no,
And again,
that's-
Brian Schwartz.
That's okay, and I think that is important to note that this does only apply to adult victims of sex trafficking, because we do have another statute for child victims.
And Chair, if I
Yes.
could just follow up on that, Melissa Hardy for the record. And that's exactly correct. There are, if the victim is a minor, the statutes are longer, statute of limitations, the time is longer for them. So, we wanted something that if someone is over 18, that they would have additional time. And so, that was the reason for the 6 years, to give those people that were not minors additional time. Because as we've stated, whether you're a minor or, you're 18 or 19 or even in your 20s, this happens to you, it can take a long time to come to terms with it and have the courage to want to come forward and go after your abuser. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like those are all the questions, so thank you everybody for answering them and for your presentation. We will move to testimony in support of AB 113. I don't see anybody in the room to give support testimony, so we will go directly to the phones.
Thank you so much, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 113, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, testify in support on Assembly Bill 113. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 648. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is John Jones, John Jones, here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association in support of AB 113. And we want to thank Assemblywoman Hardy for bringing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. If you've recently joined us, we are currently on support testimony for Assembly Bill 113. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no more callers to provide support testimony.
All right, thank you. We will move to testimony in opposition of AB 113. Again, not seeing anybody in the room to give testimony, so we will go directly to the phones.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 113, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 113, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to provide opposition testimony.
All right, we will go to testimony in neutral. Still nobody in the room to give testimony, so we will go directly to the phones.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 113, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 113, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to provide neutral testimony.
All right, thank you so much. Do the sponsors or presenters have any closing remarks on AB 113?
I'll ask Ms. Bolio if you wanted to say anything, or Mr. Schwartz first.
Gabrielle Bolio for the record, and I have nothing further. Just want to thank you all again for this opportunity to present.
And Brian Schwartz, thank you again, everyone, for allowing me to be involved in this, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa Hardy for the record. So in closing, I think AB 113 is a bill, like I said, that will be a huge step forward in helping give victims of human trafficking the opportunity to seek justice. If you hear their stories, which I'm sure many of you had, they're truly heartbreaking. And we can only can't even imagine what they really go through and how this affects their lives. The emotional and physical wounds they endure often take years to heal. Victim advocates and victims themselves will tell you that long after the physical injuries have faded, the mental and emotional scars remain and can have lasting effects. This bill will give victims the time they need for healing, to feel safe and empowered, to finally confront their abusers, and to move forward with their lives. This is justice. This is righting a wrong. And these young men and women deserve the opportunity to stand up, seek that justice, and save others from a similar fate. I thank you for hearing this bill today, and I hope that you will support AB 113.
Thank you so much. That concludes the hearing on AB 113. I will close the hearing on AB 113 and open the hearing on AB 313.
Good afternoon, members of the Senate Judiciary and Chair Scheibel. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present AB 313. My name is Alexis Hansen. I represent Assembly District 32, and I was asked by a constituent to bring this bill forward. I'm going to go over just a few opening remarks, and then if it would be okay with the chair, I would like to have my co-presenters take it from there. I have Lori Olson, who is here to present the genesis of the bill, and then also Garrett Gordon and Adam Clarkson, who represent some of the HOA communities in a legal capacity. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and so I'm grateful to have them here with me to present. I do not live in an HOA, but I also know what good business looks like, and this bill and what it attempts to do, I think, is a win-win for the HOA communities and for the unit owners. Section 1 through 4 of the bill deals with, and Mr. Gordon will go through that step by step, but just an overall view. Sections 1 through 4 go through the opt-in electronic voting for unit owners, and sections 7 through 9 go through some bookkeeping issues that would like to be streamlined. So if it's okay with the chair, we'll have Ms. Olson share what her experience has been and why she approached me to carry this bill.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Scheibel and Assemblywoman Hanson. My name is Lori Olson, and I have been in community association management in the state of Nevada since 1999 and have been a supervising community manager since 2006. I want to thank Assemblywoman Hanson for graciously agreeing to sponsor AB 313. With nearly 3,000 homeowners associations in the state of Nevada alone, it is critical we support their efforts to maximize their services to their members while keeping their manageable costs to a minimum. We are grateful for Assemblywoman Hanson's understanding and support. I served as an on-site community manager for 6 years, a portfolio community manager for 7 years, and I've been on-site at Collin Ranch since March of 2012. I hold the Professional Community Association Manager and the Large-Scale Manager designations with the Community Associations Institute. I have personally facilitated board member elections for 20 plus years in Nevada, and not one was ever challenged or disputed. Nevada currently requires 2 envelopes and a paper ballot be returned to a designated address for their board member elections, which is an antiquated, very time-consuming, and extremely costly process. Nevada is one of only a few states which does not allow for board member elections to be conducted electronically. The cost to Collin Ranch to mail the entire annual meeting and election packet, which is over 70 pages in order to comply with NRS 116, exceeds $11,000 annually. Less than 20% of the 2,400 ballots we mail are returned. Less than 20%. That means your community is really not voting. Only a few people who are smart enough to return their ballots are voting. Larger HOAs such as Collin Ranch have the need to utilize the services of a mailing house to provide the envelopes, copy, collate stuff, and mail the annual meeting packets. It is even more costly to manually stuff the 2 envelopes and the secret ballot into the mailing envelope. Most management companies require the HOAs they manage to utilize a mailing house, regardless of its size, since reproducing the annual packets puts a strain on office machines, copying supplies, and support staff. The 2020 board member election cost Collin Ranch over $13,000. Since due to COVID, we directed the postage prepaid envelopes containing the secret ballots to our CPA firm. Again, we had less than 20% return, and that was with prepaid postage. The current board member election requirements per NRS 116 and the associated costs put an even bigger burden on smaller HOAs. They're either paying their management companies or a mailing house to provide the envelopes, the copying, the stuffing. It goes on. And as we know, the postage rates continue to increase. Management companies are not in the business to lose money. Understandably, their charges to the HOAs will exceed their actual costs. The HOAs are charged on an individual basis for every piece of paper, envelope, copy, and postage cost, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, Nevada HOAs have experienced profound fraud associated with the 2 envelope and paper ballot system. Protecting and maintaining the chain of custody, particularly for the returned ballots, is critical. All too frequently, returned ballots are misplaced, lost, and some have even been accidentally destroyed. There are a few national companies who for years have been conducting confidential, secure, and affordable online elections for HOAs. The process and protocols have all been established and have proven to be safe and reliable. I'm confident that offering the electronic voting option will save Collin Ranch thousands of dollars each year. We have the need to produce a secret ballot. We will still have the need to mail the annual packet, but it will not include a secret ballot or the 2 envelopes if the owner has opted in writing to vote electronically. We understand that not everyone will opt to vote electronically. Owners who request a paper ballot will be provided one along with the 2 envelopes. As a result of offering the electronic voting option, printing, copy, collating, stapling, and mailing costs are expected to decrease exponentially. This will help to keep future assessment increases to a minimum, which benefits all members of an HOA. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
And Chair, if it would, thank you, Ms. Olson. Chair Scheibel, if it would be okay, I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. Garrett Gordon to go through the bill. And then if we could just follow through, if that be the chair's desire, to Mr. Clarkson to follow up if there's any questions. All of them are open to questions. And Mr. Clarkson could maybe address the amendment if there's additional questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hanson, and thank you for sponsoring the bill. Senator Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, for the record, my name is Garrett Gordon with the law firm of Lewis Roca, today representing the Community Association Institute and Southern Highlands Homeowners Association. I'm going to walk through briefly and certainly open for any questions the bill and specifically the proposed amendment. I'm looking at mock-up proposed amendment 3332 to Assembly Bill number 313, first reprint. I believe that document is in fact on Nellis. Let me first note the purpose of the bill. Really, it's twofold. One, to make it easier to vote. I think the more options you give homeowners, rather than just paper ballot, but electronic option, will result in more people voting. The second goal here is at the end of the bill, there's a few kind of cleanup items that I'll walk through just to kind of modernize some HOA processes that haven't been updated in a while. I should also note that 20 states have already codified electronic voting in HOAs, and in 2021, 7 states currently have electronic voting in HOAs pending, including Nevada and Virginia, in fact, just passed their bill earlier this year. So referring to the mock-up, Section 1, specifically, one other point of clarification is there's a lot of red in this amendment and a lot of red lines. And one of the biggest reasons why is on the Assembly side, we included the right to vote through a voting machine. Some of the larger associations thought that might be pretty efficient, somewhat similar to our general elections. You go into the HOA, there's a machine, you vote. But we got some pushback from the Nevada Division of the Real Estate Division, who asked us to remove that from the bill prior to this hearing. So that voting machine language you can see was littered throughout this bill, has in fact been removed per the Real Estate Division. So with that all said, Section 1, you can see allows for electronic voting, for HOAs, either for the election of a board member or removal of a board member. And then the same provisions as far as ballots apply, where they must be open and counted by secret ballot, and including by the ones by electronic means, must be reviewed, announced, and entered into the record at the association. Section 2 deals with what happens when you're removing a board member. So this was not part of our original bill, but Assemblywoman Torres, Vice Chair of Assembly Government Affairs, asked us to, while you have this bill, this section open in the bill, why don't you go ahead and deal with adding some additional due process rights if there is an election for removal of a board member. So Section 2 deals with that now a board member who is going to be removed and put on a ballot for removal does have a right to request a hearing before the board to make their case for why or why not they shouldn't be removed. So that's Section 2. Section 3 deals with, and this was important on the Assembly side, we worked through numerous different versions about kind of opting in and opting out, paper ballot versus electronic ballot. So as it sits today, every homeowner will get a paper ballot. If the homeowner provides their email address to the association asking to be corresponded with over email, then that homeowner will get an electronic ballot. However, just to be sure prior to the election that that homeowner does in fact want to receive an electronic ballot, they have a right to opt out as well. So they give their email to the association. They're going to get electronic ballot. But before an election, they can say, you know what, I'm going to opt out electronic ballots and ask for paper. If you've never provided, or if a homeowner has never provided an email address to the association, then they in fact will get a paper ballot. So everyone starts with a paper ballot, and you really have to opt in order to get an electronic ballot. And that's if and only if the board has determined that electronic ballots are appropriate for this particular HOA. The bottom of section 3 deals with how these electronic voting is conducted. It was important to the assembly that a third party was in fact hired and used in relation to doing the electronic voting. And then we included, and this language was pulled from some other bills around the country, conflicts of interest. So whoever you hire, that third party, it has to legitimately be a third party vendor to handle that secret electronic election. Of course, you can't have anyone related to the candidates, to the board members, to the manager. The voting vendor has to be completely autonomous and third party. As I head to section 4, again, just some additional clarifications regarding the secret ballots and the electronic ballot process. Section 7, now we're leaving the electronic ballot provisions and going to 2 kind of additional topics in the bill. This section 7 deals with being able to make automatic payments. So obviously, and probably all of you, myself, we have ongoing automatic payments for cell phone bill or power bill. This allows those to happen for HOAs. So HOAs would be allowed now to just make automatic payments for insurance policies, really reoccurring payments that could just happen automatically. Also for telecommunication services, telephone, cable, satellite, internet, again, just automatic payments. Also, anything else that would be billed on a monthly basis that's been approved by the board for automatic payments. And finally, the ombudsman asked to include the payments, annual payments to the ombudsman's office for efficiency and modernization. So that's the automatic payment section. And then finally, going to page 11, there is some ambiguity in the statute of what exactly happens when one management company either quits or is terminated and another management company comes in. Obviously, having all the books and records of the association for a management company is extremely critical to be efficient and to provide good service to the homeowners. There's some language in the existing statute that says everything has to be turned over in 30 days, but it does provide a gap, and there's been, again, in the industry, some confusion of what that means. So this provision says, let's give some authority to the commission in order to hold workshops, bring in industry professionals, bring in homeowners, and just codify this in regulation of what the process would be when you are changing a management company. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions. Really appreciate the time on the bill today. Adam Clarkson, an HOA attorney for years, is also on the call in the meeting here and can answer any questions. So thanks again.
Sorry, Mr. Clarkson, did you want to make any comments before we go to questions?
No, thank you. I think Garrett did a good job laying that out.
All right, then. We will take questions from members of the committee. I don't see any questions. All right, then. We will move to testimony. In support of AB 313, not seeing anybody in the room to give testimony, so we will go directly to the phones.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 775, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits, 775. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Thank you. Marilyn, Marilyn, Brainerd, B as in boy, Rainard. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Senator Scheibel, to just heartily endorse the recommendations in this bill. It's a long time coming. I served for 6 years on the Commission for Common Interest Communities and think it would be wonderful if they can come up with to help improve the management company changes. Sometimes they are very traumatic because people don't follow through and provide the information, and it's terrible impact on the community association because they are kind of sitting, suspended in action, waiting for the management agreements to be completed and for all of the records to be transmitted. Also, I think that Ms. Olson's comments regarding the low number of voting actual ballots that are returned. I have helped count ballots in the last 4 or 5 elections here in Wingfield Springs Community Association, and I can attest that it's really appalling when you have a very large number of actual owners in an association, and they do not return the ballots. And I think that the electronic system is one of the benefits, if we can say there's a benefit coming from our pandemic, is that many states have realized, we can really do business a lot more easily, more expeditiously by using electronic means. So I think anything we can do to let our associations have that ability would be a big step forward, and I know would be helpful for them not only financially, but actually having a greater participation by our owners. At any rate, I certainly heartily endorse everything that has been said in the positive side, and hope that this bill will see the sunshine at the end of the session, and we'll be able to start using these wonderful new provisions in this bill. And thank you, Assemblywoman Hanson, for representing it and for presenting it. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And a brief reminder, if you've recently joined us, we are currently on support testimony for Assembly Bill 313. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, at this time, there are no more callers to provide support testimony.
Okay, thank you. We will move to testimony in opposition of AB 313. There's still nobody in the room to give testimony, so we will go directly to the phones.
Thank you so much, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 701. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and committee. My name is Mike Kozar, K-O-S-O-R. I have served multiple terms as a HOA board to include the transition of a manager. I call in opposition to AB 313 primarily due to Section 8. To be clear, I am in support of the bill except for Section 8. Under Section 8, I argue that if, as proposed, and I am in support, NRS and the Commission is going to establish regulations related to the transfer of books and records and other papers of an association to a succeeding community manager, the existing management agreement should not be allowed to subvert or override that criteria. As I read the proposal, however, that is exactly what would occur. As proposed, the criteria for the transfer of books and records would defer to the management agreement. I ask that the phrase in that section, any exception as otherwise provided in the management agreement, be deleted. then I would be in full support of this amendment. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair, there are no more callers to provide opposition testimony at this time.
All right, we will move to testimony in the neutral position on AB 313. Not seeing anybody in the room to give such testimony, so we will go to the phones, please.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in the neutral standing on Assembly Bill 313, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 000. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Charvez Folger for the record. I'm the ombudsman from the Nevada Real Estate Division, Common Interest Communities and Condominium Hotels. I want to first thank the sponsor and CAI and all the folks for working with our office to addressing some of the concerns we had here in our office. My office will continue to be available to work on this bill or provide input if changes are required or proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair, there are no more callers to provide neutral testimony at this time.
All right. It looks like Senator Hansen has a comment or question. Please go ahead.
I just want the record to reflect, Madam Chair, that the first advice I gave to Assemblywoman Hansen was to stay the hell away from HOA bills. And so you can see, for those who are wondering out there, who runs the show? Well, now you kind of get the drift here. So just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, we can all sleep a little easier knowing that's the case then. And with that, I will ask if you have any closing comments on AB 313.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you, committee, for the opportunity. If it's okay, if we could see if there were any closing comments from my co-presenters, who I'm very grateful for.
Absolutely, and I realize now I'm not sure if they can see me as I nod my head, so please go ahead if any of you have closing remarks.
I couldn't see you up here, Gordon. I could not see you, Madam Chair, but I can now, so appreciate closing remarks. Again, part with the Real Estate Division and a number of stakeholders on the Assembly side to get where we are. Really appreciate the hearing. The comment with regards to the opposition and the amendment, I looked at it and I think we're actually neutral on it. But I'll work with the sponsor and with Mr. Kosor and make sure if we can incorporate that, we will do so. So thank you again.
This is Adam Clarkson. We'd just like to thank again Assemblywoman Hansen for helping and carrying this bill. I really appreciate the Community Association, really appreciate that. We appreciate your time here today, committee. We appreciate working with the Real Estate Division. So we really appreciate everything everyone's done and everyone's time today. Thank you so much.
Again, thank you for the opportunity. I think, as you can see by our rainbow bill and all the hard work that was done by the good suggestions from Assemblywoman Torres, the Real Estate Division, Mr. Kozar's concerns over some of that wording in the amendment that I just became aware of today, we will further engage. And I think we've got an optimum bill here where we are giving a voice and a protection in the vote to homeowners in an association. We're streamlining and saving money, helping those companies save money that manage those associations. So I see it as a win-win, and if there's a little more tweaking to do, we'll do it, and appreciate the time and your consideration today on AB 313. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now close the hearing on AB 313. That brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. I don't see anybody in the room to give public comment, so we'll go to the phones and see if there is anybody calling in with public comment.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. We are currently on public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to provide public comment at this time, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair Scheibel, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
All right, thanks so much for your help, Mr. Kyle. That concludes our meeting for today. We will be meeting again tomorrow at 1 p.m. Until that time, we are adjourned.